January 30th, 1649. A cold wind sweeps through London as a quiet crowd gathers outside Whitehall Palace. Soldiers stand watch around a scaffold draped in black, a grim structure built for a historic occasion. For the first time ever, a king would face execution at the hands of his own people, labeled a tyrant, a traitor, and a murderer. Just after noon, the palace doors swing open. A slight figure, King Charles I, emerges at 48 years old, flanked by guards, and Bishop William Juxon. Even in these final moments, the king holds himself with remarkable dignity. Dressed in dark yet elegant clothing, he wears an extra white shirt, hoping to hide the shivers of cold, so the crowd won't mistake them for fear. His face, framed by a pointed beard, radiates a calm that feels almost otherworldly as he ascends the scaffold steps. Charles meets the executioner and his masked assistant. The executioner had to be brought in quickly, as many English headsmen had refused to take the life of their anointed king. He inspects the block, set low so he must lie face down, an ultimate act of submission. Turning to the small group gathered, he begins his last speech. "I am a martyr of the people. I shall die as a good Christian. I am not guilty of starting the war against Parliament. God is my witness." His words barely reach the crowd as soldiers play a drum roll to drown him out. After a few minutes, Bishop Juxon steps forward. It says, "Sire, there is but one stage more. Though turbulent, it's very short. It will carry you from earth to heaven." The king simply replies, "Remember." With deliberate movements, Charles removes his medallion from the Order of the Garter and hands it to the bishop. He takes off his coat, tucks his hair under a white cap, lies down on the block, and extends his arms, his signal that he's ready. A swift, clean strike of the axe separates head from body, and the executioner lifts the bloody head for the crowd to see. "Behold the head of a traitor!" A deep murmur spreads through the crowd. Many rush forward to soak handkerchiefs in the king's blood, not out of revenge, but to keep a relic of their sovereign, seen by many as a martyr. England has crossed a political turning point. It has executed its own king. How did we reach this shocking moment? How did a monarch ruling by divine right find himself tried and killed by his own subjects? To grasp this turning point, we need to look back at Charles I's beginnings and the factors that sparked the English Civil War. Born on November 19, 1600 in Scotland, Charles was the second son of King James II. His elder brother, Henry, was supposed to take the throne. Young Charles was a sickly boy, struggling with rickets that left his legs weak. He was shy and had a stammer, always in the shadow of his charming brother. But everything changed in 1612 when Henry tragically died from typhoid fever. Suddenly, the fragile boy found himself next in line for two kingdoms. He took the crown in 1625 after his father's death, stepping into a time of rising religious and political unrest. Three key factors shaped Charles's reign and eventually led to his downfall. First, there was his rigid personality, along with his unwavering belief in the divine right of kings. The idea that kings get their power straight from God and to answer to no one but him. This belief was starting to raise eyebrows, especially in England, where Parliament had a long-standing tradition and expected to be involved in major decisions. Then there was his marriage to Henrietta Maria, a Catholic princess from France. In a deeply Protestant country, this raised immediate suspicion, as many viewed Catholicism as a foreign threat. These issues soon spiraled into crisis once Charles took the throne. He quickly got involved in costly and unsuccessful wars against Spain and France, demanding money from Parliament, which was hesitant to fund him without having more say in governance. When Parliament tried to put conditions on their support, Charles dissolved it in 1629, determined to rule on his own. This marked the start of what I called his personal rule, but his critics labeled it an 11-year tyranny. From 1629 to 1640, he ruled without calling Parliament, a drastic departure from tradition. To fund his government, he relied on outdated taxes and legal measures. Charles imposed ship money, which was initially just a tax for coastal towns during wartime. He sold monopolies and privileges, revived old laws, and fined anyone who broke them. Under Archbishop William Laud's influence, Charles pushed for religious changes that many Protestants thought were too close to Catholicism. In Scotland, trying to impose a new prayer book triggered a major revolt. When Charles tried to crush the Scottish rebellion, his forces were beaten, forcing him to call Parliament again for funds. But when Parliament met in 1640, it wasn't friendly. Led by John Pym, the members brought a list of complaints and demanded big reforms. Desperate for money, Charles agreed to several restrictions, including a rule that Parliament couldn't be dissolved without its own permission. But as he lost power, his desire to regain it only intensified. In January 1642, things escalated. Charles, accompanied by armed soldiers, stormed into Parliament to arrest 5 leaders he accused of treason. The attempted coup backfired. The men had already fled. The damage was done, though. The king had tried to use force against the nation's elected officials. Weeks later, Charles left London, gathering troops. By August, he raised the royal standard at Nottingham, officially declaring war on Parliament. This sparked the English Civil War, lasting from 1642 to 1649, one of the most traumatic conflicts in British history. It split families and communities apart. Charles's supporters, known as Cavaliers, faced off against Parliament's supporters, called Roundheads. After years of bloody fighting, the Parliamentary Army, led by Oliver Cromwell, emerged victorious. Captured in 1647, Charles could have saved his throne and his life by accepting offers that limited his powers. But his unwavering belief in divine right made compromise impossible. Even while imprisoned, he secretly negotiated with the Scots, French, and various English factions, trying to turn his enemies against each other. This maneuvering led to a second phase of the Civil War and sealed his fate. Exhausted from pointless negotiations, Cromwell and the military leaders decided there could be no lasting peace while Charles was alive. In an unprecedented move, they set up a special court to try him for treason. This was a turning point for the nation. Up until now, it was accepted that a king couldn't commit treason against himself since he represented the state. The trial kicked off on January 20th, 1649. When the charges were read, Charles wouldn't accept the court's authority, claiming no earthly court should judge a king. He stuck to this belief the whole time, refusing to defend himself, which only sped up the conclusion. By January 27th, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. In the days leading up to his execution, Charles showed incredible dignity. He said goodbye to his younger kids, Elizabeth and Henry. The older ones were in exile, and he told them to honor their brother, Charles II, and to forgive those who turned against him. The night before he died, he slept soundly. On the morning of his execution, he wore 2 shirts to avoid shivering from the cold. "I wouldn't want anyone to think I shiver from fear," he said. The execution of Charles there was a major turning point in European history. It was the first time a reigning monarch was publicly tried and put to death by his own people. The fallout was significant and lasting. Right after his death, Parliament declared England a Commonwealth, a republic without a king. Oliver Cromwell took charge as Lord Protector, leading a government some labeled a military dictatorship, masked as a republic. However, this republic didn't last. After Cromwell passed away in 1658, the lack of a clear successor and growing dissatisfaction with Puritan rule brought about the monarchy's return in 1660. Charles II, son of Charles I, came back from exile to take the throne. But the monarchy that returned was never the same. No English king would ever again rule with the kind of absolute power that Charles I had thought was his divine right. An interesting twist after Charles I's execution was how quickly he shifted from tyrant to martyr. On the very day he died, a book came out called Icon Basilic, supposedly written by the king during his imprisonment. It painted a touching image of him as a Christian ruler who accepted his people's betrayal. This book became a bestseller, portraying Charles as a Christ-like figure, sacrificed by the ungrateful. The Anglican Church later embraced this image. The political legacy of the regicide is perhaps the most intriguing part of the story. Even after the monarchy came back, the idea that kings ruled by divine right never regained its former power. Charles's execution made it clear: even kings have to answer for their actions. No ruler is above the law. In 1688, this lesson was officially added to the British Constitution during the Glorious Revolution, which put Parliament in charge and put limits on royal power. The impact of his execution reached far beyond Britain. Monarchs all over Europe were shocked. Louis XIV of France, just a child back then, would carry the memory of witnessing a king brought down and executed by his own people. His famous saying, "L'État, c'est moi," meaning "I am the state," and his push for French absolutism were partly responses to the threat posed by England. Even now, Charles I sparks mixed feelings. To some, he was the stubborn king whose rigid ways threw Britain into chaos. To others, he stood as a defender of principles, flawed, yes, but resolute till the end. The dignity with which he faced death helped reshape how people viewed him. Supporters claimed he died not as a tyrant, but as a martyr for tradition. Ironically, while Charles's execution aimed to end the monarchy, it laid the groundwork for a lasting type of monarchy: constitutional monarchy. On that scaffold where a king met his end, the idea of accountable leadership began. Each year, on the anniversary of his execution, a small ceremony takes place at his burial site. White roses are often laid there in memory of a king who, despite his many shortcomings, found a kind of dignity in death that overshadowed his life's controversies. The enduring question remains: was Charles I a victim of his own mistakes, or were greater historical forces at play? The answer, much like the man himself, continues to be a captivating mystery in British history.